Today I won't be telling you how the Americans cooked meat on bayonets during the American Revolution, but I will tell you about three of the most important revolutions of the West: the American, Haitian, and Brazilian. Revolutions have changed the political and social aspects of countries in many ways to this day and still continue to do so. Hi, my name is Braydon Thomas, and this is Course Crash History World. We'll start with the land of the free and the home of sicko mode. Let's go to the thought bubble. Let's start with the American Revolution. It all started with the 7 Years' War. Britain needed to tax the American colonists in order to recover from the debt of the war. Therefore, taxes such as the Stamp, Tea, and Township Acts were enacted. These taxes without representation in Parliament spurred anger within the colonists. Events like this led to slogans like "No taxation without representation" and revolts like the Boston Tea Party. The hatred for Great Britain led to the Olive Branch Petition, emergence of the Sons of Liberty, and the formation of the Continental Army by George Washington, who played a key role in the fight for independence. Soon after, the Americans wrote the Declaration of Independence, which declared that the 13 colonies were no longer under British rule. This angered the British, causing the battles of Lexington and Concord. This chain of events led to the full-scale war and rise of the extremists in the name of freedom. Acts of violence like tarring and feathering and all-out war between colonists and Great Britain, like occasions like Valley Forge and Bunker Hill. After years of war, the American colonists prevailed and had fully declared independence in the signing of the Treaty of Paris. This victory led to the writing of the Articles of Confederation and the U.S. Constitution. Now let's talk about the Haitian Revolution. It all started when the Haitians realized how badly they were being treated. So, after the French Revolution, a new man came into power, Napoleon Bonaparte. Now, this isn't going to be confused with the tater-tot munchin', lard-lovin' Napoleon Dynamite. And now for the open letter. An open letter to Tater Tots. Tater Tots, thank you for being you. You have jumped into the hearts of people worldwide. You allow for everyone to enjoy their favorite condiments, from plain ketchup to the rare but splendid bacon and cheese tots. You represent how a thing as simple as a potato can be so important. I salute you. Well wishes, Braydon Thomas. So Napoleon made all these new laws that outlawed slavery in France, but not in Haiti. So the Haitian slaves got upset that there were high racial tensions between the slaves and the plantation owners, or in layman's terms, blacks and whites. Slaves had a desire for equality and freedom, and that desire grew when the slaves heard about the French Revolution and how the slaves in France had gained freedom. Documents like Code Noir that had made slaves think about how they could achieve independence. Slaves had organized against their plantations and held secret meetings against their plantation owners. At this time, there were even small fights between blacks and whites. Slogans like liberty, equality, fraternity had gained much popularity in the slave community. Later on, the slaves had taken over half of the island with the help of Toussaint Louverture, who emerged as the leader for the slaves in the Revolution. As the slaves started revolting, plantation owners and whites ran to the capital for protection. Toussaint also created a constitution for the slaves and had reached out to the plantation owners and told them that we could avoid this war if they started paying the slaves and treating them better, but this didn't work. After this is when full-scale war was taking place. Slaves were burning down sugar plantations to spite their masters and starting battles like the Battle of Vertières, which was led by military generals Jean-Jacques Dessalines and André Pétion, who also helped in the fight for freedom. During this time, yellow fever had also broken out, which had aided the slaves in their fight for freedom, as the French were not immune to this virus. Napoleon had realized this and sent less troops down to Haiti to fight. Napoleon ended up giving freedom to the Haitian slaves because he had more important matters to attend to, like wars in Europe. This was a good thing, but slaves had to rely on themselves, which was hard for a while because they had no ties with other countries. Jean-Jacques Dessalines signed the St. Dominguez Declaration of Independence to approve of Haiti's independence, and this was also the first successful slave rebellion.
Mr. Thomas, are there any revolutions that didn't follow the anatomy of the revolution model?
Well, as you may from the past, there is, and we're about to talk about one. Let's talk about the Brazilian Revolution. The Brazilian Revolution started when King John VI of Portugal and the rest of the royal family were forced out of Brazil because of Napoleon. They moved to the Portuguese colony of Brazil. Later, political tension brought King John back to Portugal, leaving his son Dom Pedro in charge of Brazil. The war with Napoleon caused high taxes to be put on the people of Brazil, which meant more work for the slaves and lower classes. This angered the people. This in turn led to the creation of the Imperialist Party, which had a lot of followers due to the inequality of classes. This caused the slogan "Portuguese is a parasite to the British people" to gain popularity. Dom Pedro realized that Brazil would continue to have problems if they stayed under the imperialistic rule of Portugal. Dom Pedro longed for the independence of his people, as well as improving their lives. During this time, leaders like José da Silva Xavier led the first protest movements, and people started to want change. Dom Pedro had the backing of the masses, and on September 7, 1822, Dom Pedro declared Brazil's independence. As the Portuguese were fighting with France, they couldn't do anything, so Brazil won their independence. So now you can see how there was never a stage 5 or full-scale war during the Brazilian Revolution, which breaks away from the model. But in these new countries, even though there was independence, they had struggles as well. They had short-term trouble finding ways to make money by exporting goods, and there were some long-term effects like independent instability that caused some more uprising. But these revolutions also caused a shift from monarchy to new and improved democracy.
This production is sponsored by Mr. Metcalf.